Hello there. Today you're working on a two-step equations worksheet. And it's an introduction, and this is a level 1 worksheet. So if you know how to solve two-step equations, maybe you should be working on level 2 or level 3. But if you're new to this, you need some help, I'm here for you. All right, so let's get started. Let's take a look at the directions. It says here, always remember when you are solving equations, you are trying to separate the numbers and variables. In other words, you are moving the numbers and variables around so the numbers are on one side of the equal sign and the variables are on the other. So in other words, when you're finally finished solving an equation, the variable, let's say v, is on the left and the number is on the right. So they're on different sides of the equal sign. And that's what we're trying to do when we're solving any equation, or especially two-step equations. Let's continue. Most of the time, you can start by moving the number that is on the same side as the variable. It says here, helpful example. Do you see that the 4 and the minus 6 are on the same side as the variable? So right here, you see 4 and a minus 6 with the h right here. None of these guys are happy here because the numbers and the variable are on the same side of the equal sign. And the 18 over here, he's doing great because he's all by himself and he's a number. There's no variables on his side. So you can kind of think of the equal sign like a wall. And you're trying to keep the variables on one side and the numbers on the other. This tells us we have to move them to the other side. We got to move the 4 and the 6 to the other side. Let's continue over here. The best way to solve an equation is to do the order of operations backwards. Now, this isn't always perfect. I'm sure you'll find some exceptions, but it's a good way of hopefully giving you less work to do. So here's the order of operations right here. And normally you do parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, then adding and subtracting. So if we do it backwards, we should be doing anything with adding or subtracting or addition and subtraction first. It appears that moving the number that's not next to the variable is a great first step for this worksheet. But please remember, this is not always true. Do you see how the 4h is right next to the variable? Well, we should move that second or last. So right here, you see this minus 6 right here by itself? That's the one you should move first. And the reason this is a good first step on this worksheet is because if you look at all the problems, there's always a number on one side of the equation or the equal sign by itself. So we'd want to move all the numbers towards that number. Let's continue. Addition and subtraction are last in the order of operations. So we first move the minus 6. Do you see how the opposite operation plus 6 was done to both sides of the equation? So here's the minus 6 right here. And we're going to send it to the opposite side. And since we send it to the opposite side, we do plus 6 because plus 6 minus 6 is 0, which means they cancel each other out. And you notice how we did a plus 6 over here? Because whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other side. So we get 24 here and 4h left here. Let's continue. We are left with 4 and h next to each other, which means multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we need to divide both sides by 4. So right here you got 4h, which means 4 times h. And since you're sending it to the opposite side again, you're going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. And you see right here, we divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 gives us 1. And 24 divided by 4 gives us 6. Let's scoot this down a little bit. And by the way, if you look at this 1h right here, you should know that any number times 1 is itself. So really 1h is just h. So you really don't have to always write that all the time. I kind of skip that step because, 1h is the same as h, so I just write h. Next, the number and variable are on opposite sides, so we are finished. And you notice they just wrote h equals 6. They're on opposite sides of the equal sign, so we are finished. Well, that was a pretty good example. Let me clean it up a little before we start on the real problems. Now it says, now your turn. What would you move to solve each equation? So problem 1, we have 2a and 7 on the same side over here. So really no one is happy, and we're going to have to start moving the numbers over towards the 21, who's by himself, who's happy because there's no variables on his side. And I always do these little smiley faces. Some of you might think it's a waste of time, but I like to do that. Who's happy, who's not happy? So then I know who I should move. So I definitely know I should not move the 21. And per the directions, or per the example, it said we should do the addition and subtraction first. So we should move this 7 over. And since it's a plus 7, we would do a minus 7 on both sides. So it says first I would subtract the 7. Now we don't have to solve this. It's not in the directions. It doesn't tell us to solve. Then it says, then I would divide by, and right here you have 2a, which we know this is 2 times a. And if we send the 2 to the opposite side, we're going to have to do division, or divide by 2. So then I would divide by 2. So for 2 and 3, all you're supposed to do is say what you're going to do first, and then say what you're going to do after that to solve the problem. But you don't have to solve the problem. Why don't you give problems 2 and 3 a try and come back to me when you're done. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do problem 2 and 3. Problem 2 says t over 3. If you didn't know, t over 3 is a fraction, but it's the same thing as saying t divided by 3. Or you could write it like this, t divided by 3. These all mean the same if you did not know that. So when we move this 3, we're going to do the opposite operation, which would be the opposite of division, which would be multiplication. So let's take a look. Our directions, our example told us to move the number with addition and subtraction first, so we know we're going to move the minus 8. And the opposite of a minus 8 is a plus 8. And it says right here, first I would add the 8. And you would add 8 to both sides. Well, after the 8's gone, you would need to move this 3. And we just talked about it. The opposite of division is multiplication. It says then I would multiply by 3. So there's problem 2. Problem number 3. We have 15. 15's by himself. He's all happy. But over here we got a k and numbers next to each other or on the same side, which means we're going to have to move the numbers over towards the 15. You don't want to move the k, because if you move the k, then the 15's not happy. Why would you do that? So we want to move these numbers over towards the 15. I'm going to move the number that's not attached to the variable, which means we're going to add or subtract. And since this is a minus 5, I am going to do plus 5 to both sides. Plus 5 to both sides. And it says first I would add the 5. So the 5's gone because we canceled it out. And here we got 4k, and we already talked about this, that 4k is 4 times k. So if we send the 4 to the opposite side, we have to do the opposite operation, which is division. And it says then I would divide by 4. And you do that to both sides. Don't forget, you have to do that to both sides. And there are the answers to problems 2 and 3. Let's scoot down to the rest of the worksheet. Problem 4 through 12, it says solve the equations. So we're looking at problem 4. Let me change the color to a nice little blue. We have d over 2, or d divided by 2, plus 10. So we know this side is not happy because we have variable and numbers next to each other. We have the 7 over here by himself, and we know he's happy because he has no variables. So that tells us we're definitely not going to move the d over here, because then we'd make the 7 very unhappy. He would say, "Why are you moving the d over here? I was happy." So we do not need to move the d. We'll need to move the 2 and the 10. We look at this problem and we ask ourselves, who should we move first? Well, I think the easiest thing to do is move the addition or subtraction, or the number that's not attached to the variable. So we're going to move this 10 over towards the 7. And since it's moving to the opposite side, we do the opposite operation, which would be minus 10. And we do this to both sides. So 10 minus 10 is 0, so these are canceled out, or they're gone. So we're left with d over 2 equals 7 minus 10. If you didn't know how to do that, you would just do 10 minus 7, which gives you 3, and then you take the sign of the bigger number. Well, 10 is bigger, so it would be a negative 3. So we'd have d over 2 equals negative 3. And we already talked about this before. You know this is division. This is the same thing as d divided by 2. And if we send the 2 to the other side, we have to do the opposite operation, which means we're going to multiply both sides by 2. And the 2's will cancel each other out. So we're left with d equals 2 times 3, which equals 6. And since we only have one negative, the final answer is negative 6. So d equals negative 6. Now some of you might be looking at this d over 2, and you might be wondering, wait a sec, if I times it by 2, how does that cancel each other out? Well, if you think about your fractions, you would have d over 2 times 2 over 1. Remember, 2 over 1 is the same as 2. Well, you can cross cancel, and this gives you d over 1, which equals d. And that's why, when you do this, you're left with d. Right there. This is what I like you to do. Try problems 5 and 6 really quick on your own. And when you're finished, come back to me and we'll check your answers. I'll see you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do 5 and 6. Problem 5. You have 5g minus 9 equals 6. So we know no one's happy here because we have variable and numbers on the same side of the equal sign. And we have 6 over here. He is happy because he's by himself. So let's do little happy faces and unhappy faces. So we know we're going to have to move the 5 and the 9 to the other side to join the 6. That way we have the numbers on one side and the variable on the other. We're going to move the number that's not attached to the variable. And again, this isn't always true, but for this worksheet, it looks like that's the best step to do. So I'm going to move the minus 9. And the opposite operation would be plus 9, plus 9. They cancel each other out. 6 plus 9 is 15. And we end up with 5g. And we just talked about this. A number next to a variable, 5g, is the same thing as saying 5 times g. Well, since that's multiplication, we're going to do the opposite operation because we're going to send the 5 to the opposite side. So we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and the 5's are gone. So you're left with g equals 3. Problem 6. Well, the 20 is happy, but this side is all unhappy because you have numbers and variables next to each other. So you're going to have to move the numbers to the other side. Well, again, I'm going to move this minus 12 first to the other side. If I move the minus 12 to the other side, the opposite side, I'm going to do the opposite operation, which would be plus 12. And I do that to both sides. And 12 minus 12 is 0. So I'm left with 4y equals 20 plus 12, which is 32. And we just talked about this a second ago. 4y means 4 times y. And of course, we're going to send the 4 over here. We're not going to send the y, because if you send the y over, then it's next to the 32. That doesn't help us. So we're going to send the 4 over. And the opposite operation would be divided by 4. And we're going to do that to both sides. So this cancels out because it'll turn into 1y, and 1y equals y. So we just put a y right here, equals 32 divided by 4, which is 8. So we finished 4, 5, and 6. What I'd like you to do is try 7, 8, and 9 on your own. When you're done, come back to me and we'll check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do problems 7, 8, and 9. Let's take a look at problem 7. You have 14, which is all by itself, so he's happy. But over here you have numbers and variables, so they're all unhappy. And again, we're not going to move the r over, because if you move the r, then it's next to the 14, and the 14 is going to be saying,
"What are you doing? I was happy. Why are you ruining my life? I was so happy."
So you definitely don't want to be moving the r. We're going to be moving the 6's. And which 6 do you move first? Well, you move the one that's not attached to the variable, or the one that is more related to adding and subtracting. So we're going to move this 6 over here. And some of you might be thinking to yourself right now, well, wait a second, the 6 has no sign. Is it a plus or a minus? Remember, if a number or a variable doesn't have a sign next to it, it is always positive. Think about it. If you wrote $5, you're not going to write plus $5 all the time. You're just going to say you have $5. So you know that this and this are the same. If it doesn't have a sign, it is positive. So if we move this plus 6 to the other side, the opposite is a minus 6. And we do minus 6 to both sides. These cancel each other out because 6 minus 6 is 0. So you're left with r over 6 on this side. And 14 minus 6 is 8. Well, now you're going to have to send the 6 over, because you do not want to send the r over, because then you're just putting the r next to the 8. And what have you accomplished? You just put a number and a variable on the same side. So you're going to move the 6 over. And we already talked about this. This means division. It's r divided by 6. And the opposite of division would be multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 6 on both sides. These 6's are gone, so you're left with r equals 48. Problem number 8. Let me clean that up really quick. Problem 8 says 6 minus 2b. So already, if we think about it, here's a wall. We already know these guys aren't happy because you have variable and numbers on the same side of the equal sign. And you have the 10 over here, which is happy because he's by himself. And if we look at this, we have 2 next to b and 6. We know we're going to move the 6 first because he's not attached to the variable. And it means we're going to either add or subtract to send them to the other side. And the direction said do the order of operations backwards. Alrighty, so we've got this 6 for moving it over. There is no sign. That tells us it's a plus 6. So we're going to do minus 6 on both sides. And 6 minus 6 is 0. It's gone. You're left with a 2b on this side. Now, don't forget the subtraction sign. It has to come with the number and the variable. So really, it's a negative 2b. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make. They forget about those negative signs. And then we got 10 minus 6 is 4. Well, we know 2b is multiplication. This is the same as saying negative 2 times b. And if we move the negative 2 to the opposite side, we have to do the opposite operation. So this would be dividing by negative 2. So we're going to divide by negative 2 here and divide by negative 2 here. They cancel each other out. You're left with b equals 4 divided by 2, which is 2. And you only have one negative sign, so the final answer is negative. Problem number 9. We have 12 plus m over 5, or m divided by 5. So we know no one is happy over here. And we have 13 by himself. He is all happy. Let's move the 12. There's no sign again, so we know this is a plus. So we're going to do minus 12 on both sides. 12's are gone because 12 minus 12 is 0. So we're left with m over 5, or m divided by 5, equals 13 minus 12, which is 1. We know that right there is m over 5, or m divided by 5. And if we send the 5 to the opposite side, we have to do the opposite operation, which is multiplication. So we're going to times by 5, times by 5. And we get the 5's cancel each other out. So we're left with m equals 1 times 5, which is 5. Remember, if you made any mistakes, please go back and fix them. That's why you're watching the video. Also, if this is too easy for you, you can finish the handout on your own. If not, work on problems 10, 11, and 12. When you're finished, come back to me and we will check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do 10, 11, and 12 on your own. Problem number 10. You have 8. Oh, he's happy. He's by himself. And then you have 8h minus 4. No one is happy. The 4 is a little happier because he's by himself, but he still has to go join the 8. He's like, 8, I'm over here. I want to join you. And the 8's like, come on over, buddy. Get away from that scary H. So the 4 is going to come over. And to send the 4 over, since it's a minus 4, we are going to do a plus 4. And remember, you have to do that on both sides, so plus 4. The 4's cancel each other out. We're left with 8h equals 12. We already know the 8h is multiplication, 8 times h. So if we send the 8 to the other side, we're going to have to do division. So here we're going to divide both sides by 8. Running out of space here. The 8's cancel each other out. So you're left with h on this side. And 12 divided by 8. So I think we're going to have to do some long division here. 12 divided by 8. Well, 8 goes into 12 one time. That gives us 8. We subtract, we get 4. We add a decimal and bring it straight up. That allows us to add a 0. We bring the 0 down and we get 40. And 8 goes into 40 5 times, and that goes in perfectly. So we are done with that. H equals 1.5 for our answer. Hopefully you guys all know how to do long division with decimals. If not, you might want to ask your teacher how to do it, but maybe you learned it by this example I just did for you. By the way, if I'm going too fast for you or you say, wait a second, how do you do that division problem? You can always press pause and rewind it and watch it again. Maybe when you watch it a second time, you might say, oh yeah, I get it. So you can always stop a video, rewind, and watch it again. Problem 11. We get 1. He's by himself. He's happy. But on this side of the equal sign, we have numbers and variables. So that means we got to move some of these away from each other or onto the side of the 1. We need to move these numbers over. The 4 is not near the variable, so let's move him first, and plus it'll be addition or subtraction. Since there's no sign, we already know he is a plus. So we're going to do minus 4 to both sides. The 4's are gone over here, so we're left with the z divided by 3. And again, don't forget that subtraction sign. So it's actually, or a minus sign. So it's actually a minus z over 3, or a minus 3, or a minus z. You can put that minus sign to any of those. You can put it to the variable or the number. In the long run, we'll put it with the number. And then you got 1 minus 4, so you just do 4 minus 1 gives you 3. And the bigger number was negative, so it's going to be a negative 3. So you get negative 3 right here. Well, z over negative 3 means division, so really it's like z divided by negative 3. And if you send the 3 to the opposite side, you're going to do the opposite operation, which means we're going to do multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 3. You might be asking, why are we multiplying both sides by negative 3? Why not just 3? By multiplying both sides by negative 3, you are actually canceling out the negatives, because 2 negatives make a positive, and you're canceling out the 3 at the same time. Just saves us a little bit of time. So the 3's are gone, and we're left with z equals negative 3 times negative 3. Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and I just told you 2 negatives make a positive, so that will be positive 9, or just 9. So z equals 9. Last problem. All right, we got 41. He's happy by himself. And then we've got some numbers and variables over here, so no one is happy. And the numbers want to go join the 41. That means we're going to need to move the 6 and the 17 But since the 17 is not attached to the E like the 6 is, let's move the 17 first. There's no sign, and again, I'm going to repeat myself. If there's no sign, it is positive, and the opposite of positive is negative. So we're going to do minus 17 to both sides. The 17s cancel each other out, so we're left with 6e. And there is a positive there, but we don't need to worry about that. Equals 41 minus 17. Well, we're going to have to borrow from the 4. It becomes a 3. The 1 becomes 11. 11 minus 7 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. We're left with 24 equals 6e. You know that 6e is the same as 6 times e. So if we're going to send the 6 to the other side, we will need to do division. So we're going to divide both sides by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so they cancel each other out. So you're left with e equals 24 divided by 6, which is 4. 4. And guess what? We are finished. I hope I helped, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.